Zach, let me tell you a story. I want to take you back to the year 2000. So this was a particular time in our lives. We were still relatively young. We were about to start high school, both of us. And one of the things that happens is that the American Academy of Pediatrics has issued a recommendation. And that recommendation was to avoid feeding peanuts to children until about 3 years old. And this is this is something that ends up becoming a really big, really important recommendation in some ways, and also a massive failure. And I want to talk about why that is. So, this is something that kind of missed us, I think, people that are our age, because we were kind of just old enough that the whole peanut allergy thing was not something that was really commonly talked about when we were really young enough to be really affected by it. I knew a small handful of kids that had peanut allergies when I was really young. Uh, but it didn't really affect me at all when I was in elementary school and when I was at the ages that a lot of kids like really have to pay attention to these things nowadays. I don't know if that was the same with like your experience, but my experience was that I didn't really have to do much when I was really young.
No, I mean, I wonder how much is like I'm also a kid and I wasn't like a parent who was like part of the planning process of making meals for kids during or like bringing snacks for whatever event, and there's a
Right.
list of like 100 things you can't bring. I don't know if I just missed it because of that, but I don't remember a lot of kids having peanut allergies.
Yeah.
Typically speaking, at our age, when they said don't feed your kids peanuts before the age of 3. It's just because of the choking hazard,
Right.
but
Hmm.
which is tough for a lot of parents because that like peanuts are the only thing the bar has that your kid could eat.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Right. Yeah, there's peanuts at the bar, so you can have some of that. You can
yeah,
throw
you can have
shells
some of
on the
that,
ground.
and I'll mush it up at the bottom of my beer bottle so you
Right.
can, you know,
So you can have some peanut butter with it too,
yeah,
in
exactly. You have
addition to
clean
it.
peanut
Yeah,
butter.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was the same. It was the same with my experience. And I remember, yeah. So we kind of we were too young, or we were old enough when this recommendation first came in to really be like affected by it when we were at school, but we weren't quite old enough that anybody in our peer group was really having kids in any kind of meaningful way. So none of the people our age were having to pay attention to it. But I can tell you now, as somebody who has young children, that this is a big deal nowadays, and this is something that is talked about a lot. And uh, you constantly have to be vigilant of the kinds of, if you send in treats with your kids to school or daycare or something like that, you have to be careful. Even if your kid doesn't have a peanut allergy, you have to be careful to not be sending something in that is going to be potentially dangerous to somebody else. It's true at daycares, it's true at elementary schools. Kind of after first, second, third grade, something like that, the kids with the peanut allergies anyway start to regulate it themselves, and the schools kind of resign at that point and be like, we can't really do anything about it anyway. The kids have to kind of help protect themselves. But really in that really young age group area where kids might be going to daycare or starting to do elementary school ends up being a big deal and a big part of your life, even if you don't have kids with peanut allergies. Um,
Yeah, my
and
understanding is it's like if you walk into an elementary school, they have like peanut scanners, and if they detect them on your body, like a SWAT team comes out,
yeah,
and it's
yeah.
just like, I was having a payday in my car, and they're like, get out of the school. Like a guy in a van puts a mask over your face and just pulls you away.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that if they could do that, it would be like that. If that was a possibility for them, they absolutely would. Yeah. Yeah. And your perception that you mentioned earlier of this not really being like a common thing with kids before when we were younger in the past is pretty accurate. So before that recommendation, before the year 2000, there is a kind of a background peanut allergy rate in the population of the US of 0.4 to 0.5% of children, right? So one in 200. So if you knew 200 kids, one of those kids was going to have a peanut allergy. So it
I
was
will say though,
pretty
if
low.
if you know 200 kids, you better be a teacher. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
right. Yeah. You don't
Yeah.
know that many kids when you're in
Yeah.
elementary school. You know the kids in your class, maybe your siblings' friends if you have a sibling, and that's about it. So you
Mhm.
probably don't know 200 kids when you're in elementary school at that point. That's an entire elementary school in a lot of cases. So there might be a whole elementary school and there's like one kid that has a peanut allergy back when we were
And
younger.
he
Yeah.
got bullied real bad. All the kids would stand over him and be like, "Oh, what are you having? Trail mix? I'm having a peanut butter and jelly. What are you having? Just jelly, you idiot!" Pants at him, knocking him down. That's the '70s were a rough time for kids.
Yeah. There was definitely a lot more bullying then than there is now. Still happens nowadays, according to my children, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I
it was
believe
definitely
it.
different. It's not encouraged anymore, which that in and of itself is kind of a big cultural
Mhm.
change. But yeah, so it starts off from a background rate, a historical background rate of 0.4 to 0.5%, pretty low. By 2008, so 8 years after this recommendation first went into effect, the rate goes up to 1.5%. So it triples in less than a decade. And a lot of people have attributed it directly to this American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation, right? So that's a big change. That's a big change at the population level. And there are some conditions where you see big changes just because of like diagnosis and stuff like that. So autism, one of the things that people say about autism is that, oh, autism didn't happen in the past, but now it's all over the place and there's all of these different things and conspiracy theories pop up about it. But one of the biggest reasons that autism has higher rates nowadays when you look at historical data is purely because of diagnosis, right? It's purely just because
Mhm.
kids in the past who had Alzheimer's, autism were just not getting diagnosed, and now they are getting diagnosed at much higher
I
rates.
see. I think it is a massive growth of the autism rates. And before, these all these forever chemicals were in everything, people just really liked trains, and you
Right,
weren't allowed to touch their fine china. They have
right,
perfect china that's displayed a very specific way, and if you move it even a little bit, I'm gonna freak out at you.
right.
I just think people were simpler back then.
Right. Yeah. These are great grandma's collection of collectible spoons, and you don't touch
Yeah.
the spoons. But autism did not exist in the past.
It's like when
Yeah.
they invented, big science invented tuberculosis. Back in my day, we used to just cough blood. Why do we need to talk about why it's happening? It just happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a big rate of increase, and that 1.5% coming from 0.5% just 8 years before. That's a big increase in a pretty short amount of time for a condition that's just kind of out there. And the data in this case really does not seem to be that it's a diagnosis issue or that it's an overdiagnosis issue. There may be a little bit of like kind of reactive concerns where people might be getting overdiagnosed, but by and large, it doesn't seem like that's really contributing very much. It seems like there truly is somewhere on the order of like 2 to 3 times as many kids with peanut allergies about 8 years later. And that is concerning and a big mystery for a little while, but it really begs the question of like how did this happen? Is this really a big thing, or how did that come about? Why is there all of a sudden, we started paying more attention to peanut allergies as a science, and then all of a sudden there's 3 times as many, and it doesn't appear that it's some kind of weird diagnosis issue. It appears that there actually is some kind of big spike in peanut allergies. And if you look back at historical recommendations back in like the 50s and 60s, doctors recommended actually pretty early exposure to food, which included basically anything that was edible. So they didn't even really have a lot of direct recommendations concerning peanuts. Um,
Yeah, I
Peanut
feel like in the
allergies were known about.
50s and 60s, they had no idea what allergies were. They were just like, I don't know, feed the kid whatever. Get out of my office. I got to finish this pack of cigarettes. That was the doctor pretty consistently. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's not far off, right? I mean it really was like they knew about allergies and peanut allergies were known about and documented, but it was seen as this low background rate thing that most parents probably didn't really need to worry about unless you have a child with peanut allergies themselves. And their recommendation was just to start exposing kids to all kinds of foodstuffs at 3 to 5 months. And the only real limitation back then, uh, based on recommendations was really just, make sure that they're not choking on stuff, right? Just expose them to foods, get them to eat the stuff that you want, that you're eating and that you want them to eat, and expose them to a wide ranging healthy diet. And yeah, give them peanuts just like you would give them milk or cheese or meat or any other food that you're eating at the time, right? Plop a piece of bacon in their hand, give them a chunk of pancake, whatever it is that you're eating, also feed them. And that was kind of the recommendation back in like the 50s and 60s. Fast forward to the 90s, and there's some doctors that are starting to recommend delaying peanuts specifically out of an abundance of caution. There was some people who had kind of just really anecdotally started saying that started thinking without doing any studies really, just noticing themselves what they thought was an increase in peanut allergies, and they weren't really sure, and nobody had done any big scientific studies, so they just kind of started recommending themselves personally and privately at their own clinic. Those doctors started recommending a delay, and this is purely out of an abundance of caution.
I will say, historically speaking, that is the genesis of most problems. Is like some guy just had a feeling about how something worked, and
Right.
they were like, "Hey, you know what? What if I make some recommendations about it?" Some guy was walking around his life and was like, "I've noticed people with certain cranium styles don't like me very much. I bet
Mhm.
it's the shape of a person's skull
Right.
determines whether they're good people or bad people." That's historically that is, I would argue, if we're gonna coin a term for it, I would call that the Joe Rogan experience. It's just having a vibe and making society worse as a result of a vibe you
Right.
have.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you it's a real thing, right? And I think this kind of comes at a little bit of a difference in the way that medical doctors work as opposed to how a scientist like I would work, right? So I mean, I I have a PhD, not an MD. So I'm a doctor, but I'm a philosophy doctor. I'm a bench science doctor. I'm not a medical doctor. So I don't ever see patients. I've never seen patients, and I'm not ever going to. Um, but the way that things work for me as a scientist is that everything should be based on evidence and studies and stuff like that, right? Um, but when you're looking at how individual doctors are working, right, they're dealing with a patient that's right in front of them. So I think on some level, I don't want to give them too much shit about that. But I think you're right. I think there is definitely something about just kind of going with like a gut feeling instead of dealing with actual evidence, right? And and this is really kind of the crux of the idea of evidence-based healthcare. And that's a big debate in our society anyway, right? Is how much should evidence and specifically scientific evidence really be controlling and regulating different recommendations and policy decisions and stuff like that. And there are those of us that think that basically everything should be evidence-based. We should really focus and prioritize. We should focus and prioritize uh, evidence-based policies just because that is better outcomes, right? That's the things that we care about more than anything else, right? So that is kind of what I would propose and what I would really
As a
advocate for as a scientist is evidence-based healthcare
Now, as a
policies.
capitalist, I would advocate for whatever makes corporations the most money. So if
Correct.
let's
Yeah.
say a company could make like 2 cents per
Hmm.
like product
Yeah.
more than they're currently making, I say go for it.
Just do
Everything
it.
should also, yeah, just do it. Have fun, guys. you're a rising tide raises all ships. So by
Right.
that logic, if one guy makes $100 trillion, I'm
Hmm.
surely gonna get rich too.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and
It's just
so
gonna filter out. That's how that
yeah,
works. Yeah.
yeah, turn everything into a subscription, please. Um,
So I mean, like a doctor is dealing really with like the Hippocratic oath, right? Like that's really kind of the guiding light of a lot of doctors. And I don't have the Hippocratic oath memorized, but one really important element of it is this promise that they all make, which is first do no harm, right? And that really is kind of it's a it's a conservative, not in like a politically conservative kind of way, but it's just kind of like an intellectually conservative way of just saying like, okay, let's be cautious about things. Let's make sure that we don't harm any patients. So I think back in the 90s, a lot of these doctors that are starting to privately recommend delaying peanut exposure is purely, like I said, out of an abundance of caution. They're trying to do no harm to their patient. The 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 problem with that is that this personal and private opinion of some of these doctors is also coinciding with something that's occurring back in the 90s, which is the rise of alternative medicine and food supplements. And this is something that is at already exists at the time. This goes back to kind of the origins of our modern healthcare system. There were quack doctors back then, and there are quack doctors now. But in the 90s, they really start getting a foothold as an actual industry in the American medical system. And that's something that continues today that we'll come back around to, I think. But those two things start coinciding, and what you start to see really is that you start to see kind of the certain people within the alternative medicine area start picking up on this idea that hey, maybe we should be delaying peanuts. There are some of these doctors out there that suggest that we should not be giving peanuts to kids at an early age and just let them wait so that they don't develop an allergy, right? So those are that's kind of the confluence of events that happen in the 90s. And that kind of leads up to becoming more and more mainstream until in 2000 you get kind of this groundswell of certain pediatricians saying that like hey, we really should like issue just like a recommendation. And that's really all that it was at first. It wasn't like a policy decision. It wasn't them saying like hey, everybody needs to tell their patients this. It was really just kind of a broad, very softly worded, no teeth attached to it recommendation by the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, that like hey, maybe we should just kind of delay until 3 years
yeah.
old. Yeah.
I will say I didn't like the way they recommended it because they came out and they were like, actually, I wouldn't give my kids peanuts, but if you want to give your kids peanuts, that's fine. I just, that's just kind of my
Right.
thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And I just
yeah.
thought that was not handled well because they took
Yeah,
you to lunch. They took us all to lunch, and they were
yeah,
like, "Oh, okay, so you're just gonna let your kid have peanuts? Okay, well,
right.
I guess I just
Yeah.
love my kid more."
Yeah, and it really does feed into this idea of evidence-based healthcare that we were talking about too. Because like at this point, it's like you said, like there's not really, it's just a vibes thing. It's not really based on evidence. There's no study that suggests that these guys need to make this recommendation. There's no study that suggests that delaying until 3 years old is actually beneficial. It's just kind of a vibes thing, like, hey, a lot of doctors are recommending this with their own private practices. We're going to recommend that too. Maybe you guys should do the same thing. And that's really kind of it. But the problem with the problem with them making that recommendation is that they are very influential and they have a really wide profile, and it affects not just the American medical system, but there are a lot of medical systems all over the world that look to developed nations like America, like the UK, like other nations in Europe, like Japan, that look to all of these. There are a lot of developing nations that look to us as an example of how to model their medical systems at home. So if there is a recommendation that comes through some of our professional organizations, that has a tendency to filter out to a bunch of other countries as well. So fast forward to 2008, the number has risen from 0.5% of children to 1.5% of children. And in 2008, there's a study that's done by Dr. Gideon Lack and his research group, and they observed that Israeli babies had a reduced rate of peanut allergies compared to Americans. And that purely seems to be because one of the things that didn't happen was this filtering over of that American recommendation and that American soft policy of delaying peanuts. So they had this wide program where they were distributing peanuts and peanut butter to kids as part of like a common nutritional strategy. And they didn't pick up on that kind of policy of delaying peanuts. And as a developed nation that doesn't have that policy, they seem to have comparatively lower rates of peanuts in kids. And he publishes that paper in 2008 and notes that, hey, here's this country that is, as far as its medical system is concerned, is very similar to America and a lot of European countries that have adopted that policy. And you see this disparity in rates, right? So he takes that and he decides to do an actual study based on that. It's called the LEAP study. It's Learning Early About Peanut Allergies, LEAP, LEAP study. And he does that for a couple of years. Takes a couple of years for him to put that together to actually do this study. It's a nice big large sample size where they're actually doing this experiment with real kids where they're going to parents and they're saying, hey, if you are going to delay your peanut allergies, then you can be part of like the control group that's part of the normal population. But then we're going to take some of these other people and we're going to convince them to actually start an early exposure treatment program, right? And say that from the ages of 4 to 11 months, we're going to start exposing these kids to peanuts, right? Continuously until about 5 years old. So they're taking they take this group of parents and they convince them that like, hey, listen, we think that there might be evidence that delaying the peanut exposure is actually a bad thing. So let's try to have you actively give your children peanuts and peanut butter and any peanut derived products over the course of a couple of years and see what that does to it. And they found that in the control group that was avoiding peanuts just like a lot of other kids. And actually, in this one, they had the kids avoid peanuts all the way up until up until the age of 5 years old. So the control group is avoiding it until 5, and then the other group is continuously eating them until 5. And then at 5 years old, they look at how many of these kids actually have a peanut allergy. And they find that there is a 81% reduction in allergies in the kids that were exposed to peanuts, right?
Yeah.
A huge effect. It's an effect size that roughly covers that band gap that's in between the 0.5% of the population going up to 1.5%. If you take that 1.5% and you reduce it by about 81%, then you're in that same like zero point 0.4 to 0.5% range. So it basically
I
completely explains that effect.
When you said continuously eating peanuts, did they say how much peanuts they're allowing these kids to have? Are they like pouring peanuts into these kids' mouths?
Feeding them like a goose or something. No,
Yeah, is
they're
it? Yeah, are they
yeah.
goose feeding kids peanuts?
They're just normal. It's basically just normal peanut exposure. So they have a regular amount of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches
Okay,
compared to like what you and I would have had when we were younger, right? Instead of
yeah.
avoiding them completely, it's just like, oh, here, give your kids some peanuts, give your kids some peanut butter. But it's
Mm-hmm.
not like they're on like a peanut only diet. But yeah, but
You
they're
eat your
basically just
peanuts, or there's
actively
no water
encouraging.
for you, young man.
Like, yeah, it's like we're gonna feed you peanuts until you're entirely made of peanuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so the exposure group found about a 3% rate in their study. About 3% of them had peanut allergies, and in the control group, the one that ate that was actively avoiding peanuts, it was 17%, right? So big differences in this, and like the numbers don't necessarily line up exactly with the population, but still they saw this huge effect size, right? And typically in these kinds of studies, you'll see like a fraction of a percent, and you hope that you have a big enough sample size that you can pick out a small difference like that in your sample size. But 81% is huge, right? That's not a small study, right? So so that had this huge effect on the industry. All of a sudden, people within the healthcare industry, and specifically with pediatrics, were just like, this can't stand. We have to go back. So they immediately went back and the American Academy of Pediatrics changed their recommendations. That's no longer a recommendation. It's not recommended anywhere. But in some level, the damage has kind of been done, and it's going to take a while before that rolls back because a lot of that information has not filtered down to the population level yet. So when you still, I can vouch for this, when you go to elementary schools and daycares and stuff like that, even though that study was done 10 years ago now, and the recommendations basically changed almost overnight. As soon as that LEAP study was recommended, I think within the month, the American Academy of Pediatrics just changed their policy and they changed that recommendation. It was never a policy to begin with, but they
Mm-hmm.
changed that recommendation. So at the healthcare level, that recommendation changed immediately. But still, 10
Yeah.
years later, I can tell you from personal experience that this is still a very commonly held belief, and people don't really know about it. Um, and
Yeah,
people are
no,
still avoiding giving peanuts to their kids until 2 or 3 or older, and it's actively harmful to children.
yeah, no, bad information travels real quick. It gets locked down forever. Better information, good luck getting that to anyone. Good luck getting a reasonable response to anybody, especially now.
Yeah, right.
Uh yeah,
Yeah,
no, there's no way. There's no
yeah.
chance.
That's a really interesting observation. The speed of misinformation is a lot faster than the speed of reliable information. And I mean that's true, right? Because it sounds like it's scary a lot of the times is part of the reason why misinformation travels so fast because there's just it's this recommendation that goes out and then it's just like, "Oh my God, don't give your kids peanuts or they're going to develop a peanut allergy." And you've never known a kid with peanut allergies at this point, but it's really bad when it does happen, right?
I
And and that's scary to parents, right? So I
yeah.
understand why parents are saying that. But
I think we need to start presenting good information in the same absurd lascivious way that misinformation is, where instead of being like, hey, we recommend giving your kids peanuts so they don't develop a peanut allergy, we like the headline should have been like, you're literally going to kill your child unless you feed them peanuts. And then like people are like in chat, like they can't just announce it. It needs people need to be on like Reddit making posts, doctors and scientists being like, you probably already killed your child right now because you didn't give them peanuts.
yeah, I think you would have a hard time to convince many of us to be that hysterical about it. But it kind of warrants it in this situation, you know? It's like it's kind of a situation that's warranted because really the response originally was, oh, don't give your kids peanuts or they're going to develop a peanut allergy and it's going to be all your fault. But now the evidence shows the exact opposite, right? Now the evidence shows that by all means, dear, for all that is holy, do not delay exposing your kids until the age of 5 to peanuts because you're going to increase their likelihood of developing a peanut allergy by 81%, right? Like that's a huge difference. And that is kind of when I'm talking to parents personally about it, I do tell them in those terms, and I do try to tell people like, hey, listen, do not delay exposing your kids to peanuts. I know I have known people who are close friends of mine who had kids and then were immediately scared about their kids getting a peanut allergy. So they were just like, before their kids were even born, they were just like, oh, I need to get rid of all the peanuts, just like I need to cover up all of the electrical outlets and stuff like that. And it's just seen as
Mm-hmm.
kind of like part of baby proofing a house for some people. And my recommendation to people since learning about this over a decade ago is, hey, you really shouldn't do that. If anything, you should probably expose your kids to peanuts early. And that's what we did with our kids. We
Yeah.
as soon as we started feeding them food, we started feeding them peanut butter, right? Even before they could chew, even before they had teeth, we would give them, peanut butter and things just so that they could try it out and they could get exposed to peanuts early on. And
Yeah, and
and
I've the you're talking about baby proofing and like covering the electrical outlets. That's why I let my kids do a little like get a little electricity exposed. You know what I mean? Like put a
yeah,
fork in there.
yeah,
Get your body used to that.
right. How are they going to learn otherwise?
How are they
Yeah,
gonna learn? How are they gonna know? I don't want them to have an electricity allergy. Give them a little bit
yeah,
of that too.
yeah, right. Yeah. Hey, listen, we're science literate in this house. Let's do an experiment.
Yeah, let's see. Let's just see what happens. Maybe, from what I have learned from movies and comic books, it's that your kid has a chance to develop superpowers. Not a big one, just a chance.
Right. Yeah. So that's kind of where things were after the Leaf study. But fast forward to part of the reason that I wanted to bring this up now is because there was a newer study that just came out in the last couple of months. It came out in November of 2025, so just a few months ago at this point. And it came out in the Journal Pediatrics. And I had it pulled up. I'll have to put the link. I'll put the link in the description for all of these studies that I'm citing. But there was a new study that just came out in Journal of Pediatrics just a few months ago, and it showed that after this recommendation changed, so originally it started off year 2000, the recommendation goes into effect, delay peanuts for your kids. 8 years later, the peanut allergy rate has tripled. And then it's noticed that in Israel, Israeli kids have a lower incidence of peanut allergies because they never got exposed to this policy of delaying peanut exposure. Then fast forward to 2015, and there's this big leap study that suggests that, hey, listen, this policy and this recommendation these is actively harmful to kids, and it's actually causing a big increase in peanut allergies. So we need to stop doing that. And then that recommendation, that original AAP recommendation, goes away and it slowly starts filtering out. And if you talk to a pediatrician nowadays, my guess, and the pediatricians that I've spoken to just through my kids going to pediatrics appointments, they seem to have gotten the message and they're trying to disseminate it to their patients, but the patients are surrounded by a sea of misinformation on this subject, and they have to kind of get re-educated on that. But slowly it's starting to filter out into the public, and people are starting to kind of take it on board. And then now in November of last year, peanut allergy rates have gone from uh 0.79% in the previous time period in 2015 down to about 0.45, right? So now it's kind of starting to go back down to a more historical rate for kids that are growing up now. Um, and that's a big deal. That's a huge thing for any of the kids that are starting to grow up nowadays. Hopefully we're going to return to some kind of like background rate, but there's going to be this kind of like 20-year period where we're going to have a bunch of kids, a generation of people that have a increased rate of peanut allergies.
Yeah, I will
But
say
there's a success in the end. Yeah.
I will say there is something to be said that is kind of a bummer about all those kids who got like that generation of kids who got this peanut allergy. And I feel so much empathy for the kids who didn't get the allergy at that time and then they were getting bullied. They were like, "Oh, you can have peanuts? Oh, let's kick this guy's ass," because all these peanut allergy kids were just really,
Yeah. They had
is
their moment and they decided to turn the tables. Yeah.
yeah, it was very. And then there was a whole like West Side Story thing going with the kids who do have allergies and don't have allergies, and like they're from two
Yeah.
different worlds.
Uh-huh. Yeah. They're like
Yeah,
squaring off at the recess
they're
yard.
squaring off. Yeah,
One of
one of
one
them. There's
one of
no
them's
switchblade.
holding
One
like
of them has a
Snickers.
payday. Yeah, yeah. One of them, yeah,
Mm.
one of them has an almond joy, and one of them.
Mhm.
What's a candy equivalent to like an almond joy? One has peanuts and one doesn't. It's
One kid is
like a Snickers
holding
and a
like,
Milky Way.
yeah, right. Yeah. They're the kids with peanut allergies are holding like black licorice in their hands, and then the
Ugh. I can't. I would if a kid was like, "Oh, my favorite candy is black licorice." Kid needs to go on a watch list immediately. What do you mean, black licorice is your
black
favorite?
licorice is your favorite. Yeah,
You come
that'd
on.
be pretty extreme. I'll put it on record. I love black licorice. It's
I
not my
yeah,
favorite though.
and it's and it's one of my biggest concerns about you as a person.
Right. Yeah, yeah, it keeps me up at night with how worried I am about you.
It's
Yeah,
funny. My brother, his wife loves black licorice, and he's like, it's amazing for me because every now and then she'll want candy, so I'll buy black licorice, and then I don't end up eating all the candy. It's
right.
like she'll have black licorice anytime she wants.
Hmm.
I'm not gonna like if she was like, I want Oreos, it's like I'm eating that. I'm eating all
Yeah,
of those.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was part of it. I didn't really like black licorice when I was a kid. I liked red licorice, which is kind of not real licorice anyway, but I liked red licorice when I was a kid. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I really liked black licorice, but now I like black licorice. I just gave some to my kids for the first time last week, and they were not a fan.
Yeah, they were like, "What's wrong with you, Dad?
You said this was candy. How
You
dare
said this
you?
was candy. You've betrayed me for the final time, Father. I will destroy you."
Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of where that gets us to. And it is worth it to notice. So I said that we were going to come back around to kind of alternative medicine, and one of the people who really has been kind of like big in this space for a long time and has been speaking about these things mostly about a lot of other things, but really big in the alternative medicine space is RFK Jr., who
Mhm.
who is now the Secretary of Health for the current White
Just
White House administration.
yeah,
And
the
he,
smartest man anyone knows now,
sure,
RFK Jr.
sure. Yeah, so he has been one of the people who for well over a decade has been talking about how, peanut allergies have been on the rise and why that is, and he offers up a bunch of um, explanations for it that are centered around like excess silver in the environment and stuff like that, and plastics and things like that. None of which appears to be true because it all really appears to be associated with exposure at the right age, as a lot of these studies have shown. But that's the kind of thing that he has been saying for a long time. And his main thing is vaccines, right? But he is kind of all over the alternative medicine space. And when this recommendation, or when this new study came out in 2025, um, in November of last year, he was immediately asked about it and immediately started saying that, like, yeah, that's not real. We don't agree with that. We still think that it's not an exposure problem. So, I mean, the idea that
Does
that misinformation is not getting pushed out to parents on the subject is still pretty false, right?
and
So
this is the thing
he
though
yeah,
about RFK Jr. perfectly fits into my theory. It's just vibes. He just
right.
has a feeling that it's probably plastics or silver, which is also crazy to me because
Yeah,
he seems like the type of guy who drinks colloidal silver. But like,
probably.
yeah, like he's gotta, right? But
Hmm.
like, he just has a feeling, and he's like, he has the level of delusional confidence that just tells him to just keep telling people things,
Right.
tell everyone else what to do. And
Yeah.
as a result, like kids are gonna have peanut allergies for
Hmm.
another 20. We're like the peanut allergy rates are gonna go up significantly because
Yeah.
this guy just has a feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and he does link it back to vaccines for him since that is like his main thing. So he says that
Sure.
he links it back to aluminum in vaccines, that like there's aluminum in the vaccines and that's what's actually causing the peanut allergies, right? And there's
Yeah.
no I want to be clear to anybody listening. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. There's no evidence suggesting that that might even possibly be some kind of mechanism. It really seems like it's completely and totally explained by the exposure at the right age, right? And these
I
series of studies really highlight that like there is a background rate, exposure recommendations changed, the background rate increased, uh, a new study comes out that changes that recommendation goes away, and then we are already, even though there's still a ton of misinformation out there and there's still a ton of parents that are actively avoiding it, we are already almost back down to historical rates, right? Even with the misinformation that's all over the place in this, right? So there's no evidence suggesting that aluminum in vaccines is causing this, or silver or plastics or any other thing that he wants to say.
It's hard to not listen to RFK Jr. though because he looks so healthy. He's the healthiest looking man I've ever seen. He doesn't
Right.
look like someone sewed a bunch of like dry beef jerky into a human figure and then like a wish brought it to life and then now it like roams the woods looking for like already dead meat to like put in his like walking freezer so that he can cook later. Yeah, no, he looks like a really healthy guy, and I'm so glad we
Looks
keep listening to this man.
he looks so healthy. He looks so healthy. And when you listen to his words, it's just you can just hear all of the wealth of knowledge that's coming forth too.
Yeah, and a man who does not like wearing shirts and has the skin color of like currently cooking bacon, and just really glad we keep listening to this man. But for some reason, also quick aside, some reason he's a
Uh,
ladies' man, and I'm like, I can't. Nothing makes me be like, I guess I just don't understand women more than the fact that this guy
right.
has like never not had a date.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he is a Kennedy, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
apparently the name is enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and he's making friends wherever he goes too. Yeah, for sure. It's just yeah, but yeah, so that's kind of the whole story of how peanut allergies kind of came into the fore and became like a huge public health issue, and is now with kind of good quality evidence-based healthcare policies and recommendations is now coming back into control, right? So we one of the things that you've recommended that you always want to do is you always want to end on a positive note, right? So I want to end on that positive note that this is where we're standing, right? Peanut allergies have started coming back down to historical levels. Food allergies, the study that came out in November also showed that food allergies in general, so looking at other food allergies like eggs and milk and cheese and shellfish and stuff like that. Those also seem to be coming back down to lower levels because one of the things that happened with the peanut recommendation is that people were like, "Oh, peanuts cause allergies, food allergies. Maybe we should just kind of do the same thing with peanuts or with all the other food allergens as we did with peanuts." So people started avoiding contact to all these other things that they also thought might cause a food allergy, and it turns out the rates of food allergies went up kind of across the board just because of this one soft peanut recommendation. But those allergy levels have also started coming back down too. So we've seen over the last like decade or so, we've seen a decrease in food allergies in addition to peanut allergies. Even when you take peanut allergies into consideration, when you're just looking at other types of food allergies. So there's a good thing here. There's a good message that's happening here. And this is really a success story of our modern medical system and a success story of science that there was, a mistake that was made. It was discovered and rectified using the methods of science and evidence-based medicine. And now all of a sudden, our world and our society and our population is happier and healthier for it. Maybe not happier, but healthier for it,
Yeah,
right?
we're definitely the least happy society, but
But
we can still have a Babe Ruth, and that's what I care
yeah,
about.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
A candy that I think is only I eat. Like I'm worried when the boomers die, Babe Ruth is just not going to exist anymore, which is real rough for me cuz I actually like those.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I do like papers. I don't eat them very often. And paydays. I hadn't eaten a payday in forever. I hadn't even thought about paydays until you started mentioning it.
Yeah, you
And
know who
now I'm
loves
gonna have to go get
payday?
a payday. Who's that?
Yeah, we have a friend, we have a mutual friend named Christian who loves
Hmm.
paydays, and it feels like the most Christian thing I've ever heard in my life is that he like won't eat regular candies, but he
Uh-huh.
will eat paydays
We'll eat a payday.
specifically. He like
Yeah.
thinks that candy bar level of chocolate is too low brow for him, but he will eat a payday.
But he will eat a payday. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
funny. That does feel like a Christian thing. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
So
well,
yeah.
thank you for
So
telling me
that's
about
that.
this. This was a great story. I loved hearing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
I'll,
appreciate you listening. This was fun. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I can't wait for the next one and to hear
Yeah.
about, more stuff I don't know, which could be honestly pretty much everything. Uh, Before we
Yeah.
go, Ryan,
Uh-huh.
is there if people want to learn more about you and follow along with what you're working on and stuff, how do they find you?
Right, yeah. So I'm gonna post this as a podcast, and I'm still figuring out exactly where I'm gonna post it and how I'm gonna post it. I do have a YouTube channel that I am building up right now. So that is the YouTube channel's name is Myelin, Myelin. It's a neuroscience reference. and I'm gonna post this on there too as a podcast episode. I have a website called evolio.com. And I'll put links to these in all the descriptions as well. Yeah, and you can keep up with me at those places. You can follow this podcast. I think we'll just keep doing these podcast episodes forever, as far as I'm concerned. This is fun. There's so many different things that we can talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. And as a
And what
person with no scientific background, everything is magic to me. So I'm excited to learn things and
yeah.
then regurgitate them like a parrot at a party.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I learned this new thing the other day. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What about you? Where can people find you?
I am at ZHJOBE on all social media, so feel free to follow me on anything. It will not be informative in any capacity, but you can come check out some shows that I got coming up and uh, follow along for all the sketches that I need to post that I have not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, come check us out.
Zach, let me tell you a story.